call this meeting to order. I have the human pledge of allegiance. I'd like to turn the floor over to our solicitor.
Good evening,
Can't hear you.
everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Speak up.
If anybody can hear me, let me know and I will talk louder.
Good.
Initially, I want to say that this is a large room, it's big, and some of you sitting in the back may want to sit in the front so that you can hear better, and leave that up to you. The other thing I want to say is that this meeting apparently is being recorded. Is the recording both audio and video that you're doing?
Yes,
Can you just identify who you are?
I'm Gwyneth Fowler. I'm independent media. I'm here on behalf of the citizens of the township.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
you folks,
Thank
just
you.
be aware the meeting is being recorded, both audio and video, and if you speak, you're going to be on that audio and video, and that is permitted in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are here tonight for the purpose of holding a conditional use hearing on the application of Effort Solar LLC for conditional use approval of a commercial solar installation located partially in Polk Township and partially in neighboring Chestnut Hill Township. This hearing will concern only that portion of the project located in Polk Township. The total acreage of this project is approximately 486 acres, approximately 200 acres of which are located in Polk Township. The project is located primarily to the west of Long Mountain Road, although a small portion of the project is also located to the east of Long Mountain Road, south of Kresgeville Farm Road. The 200 acres are located in an R2 zone in Polk Township where commercial solar facilities are permitted, but only as a conditional use. Under Pennsylvania law, conditional use is a permitted use that is subject to certain conditions set forth in the zoning ordinance, as well as reasonable additional conditions that may be imposed by the Board of Supervisors. A conditional use application requires a public hearing at which the applicant presents evidence supporting its conditional use application. I want to stress that this is a hearing and not a public meeting. There is a stenographer present who will stenographically record all testimony and statements made here tonight. Because this is a hearing, any testimony is being transcribed by a stenographer. It is important that only one person speaks at a time so that the stenographer can correctly transcribe the testimony. Members of the audience may not speak or yell out during testimony. If someone is recognized by a party, which I will get to in a minute, I will have the opportunity to question any witnesses and make their own statement at the conclusion of the applicant's presentation. At this time, the Board of Supervisors will mark certain documents as township exhibits in this hearing. Township Exhibit number 1 is going to be the application for conditional use approval of Effort Solar Inc. regarding a commercial solar power generation facility that is dated May 30th, 2023. The applicant contains, as required by our ordinance, a list of all property owners within 200 feet of the exterior lot lines of the property subject to the application. The application also includes a plot plan showing the land in question and the proposed solar panel improvements, as well as supporting documents. Exhibit number 2 is the notice of this public hearing and proof of publication of the same in a newspaper of general circulation within Polk Township, Monroe County, Pennsylvania, being the Pocono Record, where this notice was published 2 times as required by the law on June 28th and July 5th, 2023. Exhibit number 3 is a certificate of posting and mailing signed by the Polk Township zoning officer, Tracy Herman, indicating that she posted the property subject to the application with the notice of hearing on July 7th, 2023, along with photographs showing the posted notice, as well as a certification of the property owners within 200 feet of the project were mailed a notice of this hearing. On July 3rd, 2023, the certificate also indicates that the notice of the hearing was posted at the township offices on July 7th, 2023. Finally, exhibit number 5 is a letter of the Polk Township Planning Commission Secretary indicating that the Polk Township Planning Commission at the regular meeting of July 12, 2023, reviewed the application for conditional use and passed the same on to the Board of Supervisors without a recommendation for approval or disapproval. And excuse me, I missed exhibit number 4. Exhibit number 4 is a letter of the Township Engineer, Russell Kresgeville, dated July 7, 2023, reviewing the conditional use application. The next order of business in this proceeding is to determine if anyone present wishes to request party status in this matter. The Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, which governs conditional use hearings before the Board of Supervisors, provides that individuals and organizations may become parties in the matter if permitted to appear by the Board. The provision of the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code has been interpreted by the courts to require for a party requesting party status that they establish what is known as agreed status for the purpose of standing. In order to have standing and therefore be eligible to be a party must have a substantial, direct, and immediate interest in the claims sought to be litigated. In order to have a substantial interest, there must be some discernible adverse effect to some immediate interest other than the abstract interest of all citizens to have others comply with the law. The court deems persons to be aggrieved when they will suffer what is known as an injury in fact. Now, notices were sent out to individuals, as I referenced previously, and if you receive such a notice, you're probably going to be recognized as a party if you want to participate as a party without objection from the applicant. One significant factor in determining whether a party is aggrieved is the proximity of the party's residence or other properties owned by the party to the land proposed to be developed. With respect to any organization seeking to establish party status, that organization must establish that at least one of its members would suffer immediate or threatened injury as a result of the action challenged. An individual or organization granted party status will complete a form that I will provide listing the party's name, address, email address, and telephone number. These documents will be admitted as evidence and made part of the record in this proceeding. By being granted party status, such party will be able to participate in these proceedings. Specifically, such party will be able to question any witnesses who testify on behalf of the applicant, as well as present their own evidence and testimony. Any testimony given by such a party must be given under oath. Such party will also be able to obtain a written decision from the board and have the right to appeal that decision to the Monroe County Court of Common Pleas, which I will describe a bit later. At this time, I would request any party or organization wishing to be recognized as a party to come forward. I will ask several questions, and then the counsel for the applicant will also be able to ask you questions. The counsel for the applicant will be entitled to object to any party seeking party status, and the board will make a decision as to whether the party will be recognized. So at this time, I would ask, does anybody wish to have party status in this matter? Does anybody wish to have party status in this matter? Yes, sir.
Forward or speak?
Yes, why don't you come forward so we can hear you?
My name is Michael Mercury. I own a property next to one of the properties under question. However, my property itself is in Chestnut Hill Township. That's
Okay.
the property that is also Polk.
Did you receive a letter from the township?
I did not.
Okay. How far is your property from the proposed project?
I'm right next to it, so with 100 feet border, 100 feet.
All right.
No objection.
Okay, you may have party status, sir. I ask you to complete this form. Yeah, give it a hand out. Just complete that and hand it back to me, please. Is there anybody else that would like party status? Yes, sir, come forward.
Same thing.
I'm sorry, your name again?
I got all that.
You have to speak to the court can hear you.
And,
You got a letter?
yeah, I'm probably 200 feet away from the property.
Okay. Mr. Fox?
No objection.
Okay. You are recognized as a party, sir. Just complete that and hand it back to me. Is there anybody else that would like to have party status?
Yes. Go ahead.
Your name, sir? Did you get a letter, sir?
Yes.
Okay. How far do you live from the proposed project?
180 feet.
Okay. Mr. Fox?
No objection.
Okay, we recognize you as a party, so you just have to complete the form to a pen. You want a pen? There was another, one back here.
My name is Jennifer Carey. I live at CA 401. I live directly across the street. I did get a letter.
Okay. Mr. Fox?
No objection.
Okay, we will recognize you as a party, please.
Thank you.
Okay. And I think we'll recognize you as a party. Do you need a pen? Okay. Anybody else?
Are we gonna get a copy of what you just read?
No, you can, it's being transcribed.
Transcribe, what does that mean?
That means the court reporter's typing everything down,
And
and
how will we get a copy?
you could order a transcript from the court reporter. Anybody else?
Douglas,
Go ahead, Mr. Sweeney.
Douglas Swain, about 200 feet from the property lines in both Chestnut and Polk Township.
Did you get a letter, sir?
No, I did not.
You're 200 feet?
Between 200 and 300 feet.
Sir, my name's Dave Fox, counsel for the applicant.
No, yet.
Hello, sir. What is your?
183 Kresgeville Farm Road.
Sure, and what is your aggrievement or harm?
Value of my home, my 6 acres.
Based upon is there anything specific or is it a general concern?
I'm generally concerned about the value of my home.
If it's general concerns, I have no objection.
Sir, can you come forward and get a statement?
Mark Martini. I'm less than, not even 100 yards, you're right back behind.
Did you get a letter?
Yes, I did.
No objection.
You can be recognized as a party, sir. Need a pen? I'd like them back before we start, everybody. Pardon me? Yes.
Thank you.
Is it possible you could repeat something? You said something about the,
Let me finish this process first, and then I will hear from you. Anybody else want to be recognized as a party? Anybody else want to be recognized as a party? Okay, hearing no further interest in being a party, sir, your questions?
you said the Board of Supervisors passed this forward without any, without approving it or disapproving it at their regular meeting?
No, that's not what I said. What I said was the planning commission of the township passed it to, first of all, under conditional use law, the decision whether or not to approve it or approve it with conditions is made by the Board of Supervisors. It's not made by the planning commission. The planning commission passed it on to the supervisors who got a recommendation because they felt that there were items that were missing from the application that the applicant had not yet supplied, which the applicant planned to supply at hearing, so that they could not make an informed decision when we had the planning commission meeting last week. Okay? If anybody fill one of these out that has not handed it back to me, I want to have them all back before we start. Anybody else? So there's still forms out there that have to come back?
Right here.
Okay. I don't mean to rush you.
What media are you with?
Are there any more sheets out there that have to come back? Okay, thank you. We will now open this hearing, which will proceed as follows. The applicant, who is tonight represented by legal counsel, Mr. Fox, shall begin by presenting witnesses and evidence in support of this application. After each witness, any party recognized as having party status will be able to question the witness. The board solicitor for the board will have the opportunity to ask, for the board and the board will have the opportunity to ask questions. At the conclusion of the applicant's case, any party granted party status may present evidence or make a statement to the board. Counsel for applicant and the solicitor for the board will have the opportunity to ask questions. At the conclusion of the applicant's case, any party granted party status may present evidence of their own or make a statement to the board. As I indicated previously, that must be done under oath. Counsel for the applicant and the solicitor for the board will also have the opportunity to question any party who presents testimony or evidence. After all parties have completed their evidence, the board will permit any non-parties, that is the folks who did not enter their appearances as parties, to make a brief statement. In any such statement will not be considered as evidence in this proceeding, but the supervisors will listen to it. The hearing will then be closed. The board will not make any decisions on this application tonight or at any further hearings in this matter. The board is permitted to meet after the conclusion of the hearing to deliberate and thereafter render its decision. The decision must be rendered within 45 days from the close of the last hearing. The board will vote on any such decision at a public meeting. The board will issue a written decision that will be sent to the applicant in writing, as well as to all those individuals who have party status. The applicant and any party may appeal the written decision of the board to the Monroe County Court of Common Pleas within 30 days of the date of such decision. Finally, this hearing may not conclude this evening. In fact, I know it will not conclude this evening. There will be a second hearing in this matter, and it will be held on August 29, 2023 at 6 p.m. at the same location. At this time, we'll commence the hearing by inviting the applicant, by and through his attorney, to present their evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrari. Can everyone hear me okay? Is the mic picking up?
No. Unless it's the internet.
Oh. How about now? No? So good evening. My name's Nate Fox. I'm the attorney for the applicant, Effort Solar. Effort Solar is the corporate name for Samsung Solar, who is the applicant in this matter. We'll have two witnesses this evening. We'll have Darren Sun, project manager with Samsung, and Tom Kettlehorn, sorry if I did not pronounce that exactly correctly, a licensed professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with Kinley Horn, which firm prepared the plans.
I can't hear you, sir.
The plans that are before the board this.
Oh, now it's working.
Where's the IT guy?
How about now?
There you go.
Thank you to whomever connected our microphone. To back up a little bit more, just to make sure that everyone heard. My name is Nate Fox. With me tonight are Darren Sun, project manager with Samsung Solar, which is the owner of Effort Solar, the applicant before the board this evening. Also with me is Tom Kettlehorn from Kinley Horn, licensed engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Before doing a summation and preamble, may I have the witnesses sworn in, because I'm going to ask them to make sure that everything I've said is true and correct. Would you mind if we did that now?
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I did. Excellent. Thank you very much. So this solar facility is the subject of a conditional use application. Under the Polk Township zoning ordinance, section 847 provides for solar power generation commercial in this zoning district, provided that we meet a lengthy set of criteria as set forth in the ordinance. As Mr. Ferrari said, this is approximately 200 acres. There's another 280 some acres in Chestnut Hill Township, which is not Not the subject of tonight's application. That has to go through a separate process in Chestnut Hill Township. The existing condition of the property, as you folks are all familiar, is largely unimproved and split largely between agricultural use and woodlands, abutting several public roads, Long Mountain Road, Bear Road, Kresgeville Farm Road, all in Polk Township. As Ms. Ferrari said, a conditional use in Pennsylvania is a permitted use, provided we, the applicant, meet the burden, which your ordinance has a number of conditions and criteria which we have to meet. Your township engineer issued us a review letter. We have a response to that. All of the comments and all of the criteria in the zoning ordinance are either comply or will comply. When you hear us say will comply, that means that there's a piece of information or something that has to be done, but can't be done later or would not be able to be demonstrated or prove that it complies until a later point. One thing, for instance, the height of the solar panels. The ordinance maximum is 35 feet for height in this district. They'll all be much lower than that and will be buffered, so they won't be seen from surrounding properties unless you're significantly on a hill. But that is something we say will comply. The panels aren't built yet, but that is something by way of example that would be complied with in the future, and we are then bound by the ordinance to comply. Specifically, there are things that are the height of the solar collectors, fencing, landscaping, compliance with federal, state licensing and other regulations, insurance coverage requirements, providing access pursuant to the zoning ordinance, no disturbance to communication signals subject to federal standards, glare restrictions, proving that there's no historic structures within 500 feet of the property, compliance with industry standards, compliance with the Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code, compliance with electric codes, appropriate warnings, signage standards as set forth in the ordinance, limitation on signs. This is not a facility that there will be some impacts during construction as far as construction activity, but once the project is complete, assuming we're able to get approval, it will be buffered and there will not be folks on site on a daily basis or in or out regularly, such that the impact would hopefully be minimal. You'll hear testimony to that effect tonight, and then if there are necessary other nights of hearings. We are required to show that we are able to provide interconnection within a specific distance to this property, minimization of any stray voltage or electromagnetic fields. We have to provide fire suppression systems and an emergency response plan, working with the township fire company and emergency services on same. There are specific details required for the site plan, which we've submitted. We also have some supplemental information. And some of that also, there's a land development process. So this is the first hurdle, being zoning. If we're able to obtain conditional use, your township has a second set of ordinances called the subdivision and land development ordinance, which requires us to come back and have everything reviewed by the township engineer, the Monroe County Conservation District Planning Commission, and obtain all appropriate reviews to do that as well. We also have to obtain authorization from a utility company approving the connection of the property. We have to ensure preservation of natural ground contour to the greatest extent practical, includes compliance with erosion and sediment control requirements of the Monroe County Conservation District and land development requirements of the Township of Saldo. We also have to preserve trees to the maximum extent possible, including compliance with tree replacement requirements upon decommissioning, limitation on permitted signage and identification, which I'm sorry to repeat that, and also ensure that underground installation of on-site utilities. In addition, we're required to have a decommissioning agreement and post financial security to ensure that if for some reason Samsung Solar is not here, ample funds are with the township to decommission this project and also replant trees as specified within your ordinance. So this project on our end has already undergone careful study, but it's now our burden to prove to the township that we do meet the requirements of the ordinance, present evidence of testimony, which you will hear this evening, and what's already been completed in that aspect. The glare study has been submitted. An environmental site assessment will be submitted and reviewed by the township, but we do not anticipate any negative findings or prohibit things that would be cause a prohibition on this use. An archaeological report has been submitted and has confirmed that there are no historic structures within 500 feet. An above-ground resources report has been completed. The cultural resources report has been completed, along with a wetland delineation report. So testimony will cover all the specifics as required within the zoning ordinance. And then we will also address the comments set forth by your township engineer, who has reviewed this application. In addition, there are several general standards within your ordinance for a conditional use. So there's specific criteria for the solar power generation commercial facility, and then general requirements within section 1209D of your zoning ordinance. One being that the solar power generation facility will operate in harmony with the purposes, goals, objectives, and standards of the Township Comprehensive Plan and Township Code. It will demonstrate that by meeting all of the criteria of the specific conditional use requirements. In addition, the proposed location being uniquely suitable for the use will not adversely affect adjacent property, the character of the neighborhood, traffic conditions, or other matters affecting public health, safety, and welfare. And again, we will present testimony to support meeting that requirement. It will not impose an undue burden on facilities, utilities, or services of the township. Present testimony to support that as well. And in addition, we will not have any adverse effects on things that the township may consider, including location, arrangement, size, design, general site compatibility of buildings, lighting, and signs, adequacy and arrangement of vehicular traffic access and circulation, including intersection, road widths, pavement surfaces, dividers, and traffic controls, location, arrangement, appearances, sufficiency of off-street parking and loading, which really doesn't apply to a solar facility, adequacy and arrangement of pedestrian traffic, again, that's largely inapplicable, adequacy of stormwater and drainage facilities, with stormwater leaving the site not exceeding pre-development levels, and facilities shall be designed to accommodate a 10-year storm. We will absolutely comply with that, and we'll hear our professional engineer testify to the same. The ordinance requires adequacy of water supply and sewage disposal facilities, largely inapplicable, but it's a general requirement. And adequacy, type, and arrangement of trees, shrubs, and other landscaping constituting a visual and/or noise buffer between the applicants and adjoining lands. And we have some plans and renderings we'd like to show you this evening. And also providing adequacy of fire lanes and other emergency zones and the provision of fire hydrants. And that's something we'll absolutely work with the township on. The land development process, once, if approved, the conditional use, we'll have to do some surveys, further surveys and studies of the property. If the layout may change, it certainly will not become larger, but if it does change, that will dictate where and how the fire lanes and emergency fire hydrants will be located. And special attention to the adequacy and impact of structures, roadways, and landscaping in areas with susceptibility to ponding, flooding, and erosion, and that will be addressed as well. You'll hear all that testimony supporting the application. That is a general summation. I do have an exhibit packet which I would like to provide. If we may call this collectively Applicant 1. And we'll be referring back to T1, which is the conditional use application. But tab 1 of Exhibit A1 contains a revised conditional use plan set in response to the township engineer's review letter comments. Tab 2 contains landscape buffer renderings showing superimposed on existing conditions what the initial buffering will look like, and those will generally be about
8 to 12 feet initially with a maximum height of 30 feet when fully mature. A decommissioning cost estimate at tab 3, which is a requirement of submittal. That will be, and the applicant would agree to a condition that upon final land development approval, that amount would be reviewed and ensured for accuracy and then re-reviewed as required by the zoning ordinance. And in addition, at tab 4, we have a response to the township engineer's review letter dated July 17, 2023, noting agreement to comply or acknowledgement of all conditional use and other ordinance requirements. And as mentioned, the environmental impact statement report will be submitted, we expect in the next week or two, and would ask that that be reviewed by the township engineer, but we do not anticipate any deficiencies. Are there any questions of me before I put on witnesses?
Not for me.
I raise my hand.
Are you a party, sir?
I'm not, I didn't sign a sheet, but I have questions.
Okay, you can't ask questions unless you're a party. I said that in the statement.
Okay.
Is anybody who's recognized as a party have questions?
You have any questions?
Why can't I ask questions? I don't understand.
I said at the beginning, in order to participate and ask questions, you have to be recognized as a party. That's what the law says. And you
Really?
Yes, sir.
Not what Mr. Fox said.
I'm a farmer. I have questions.
Sir, I'm sorry, but that's what the law is, and that's what the ruling of the board is.
Oh, my God.
At the end, you could ask questions.
At the end, I can ask.
Yes, sir.
I'll wait.
Is anybody that was recognized as a party, do you have questions?
Yes, I have a question. You didn't mention the DEP.
What's your name, sir?
Stuart Hochberg. You didn't mention the DEP, which I've spoken to, who said once this proposal is in action, you guys have to go through the DEP, Dean Ritter, who's in Wilkes-Barre. You didn't mention them at all. Why?
I gave a general summary. We'll absolutely have to go through the DEP process, an NPDS process. That is just, we're premature at that point because that's something that's part of the land development process. So we're not trying to hide or avoid anything. This is it's a multi-step, multi-stage process, with zoning being the first of several steps if we hope to complete this development.
And I guess, again, you don't have copies to give the participants of anything you said.
Well, so the application is a public document at the township. I don't know if that's available online.
Well, it should have been available here for us.
Well, sir, we'll be putting plans and such up on the projector. I have copies of supplemental information that I have enough copies for the Board of Supervisors and they can be shared as well. I do not have enough copies for everyone, as I had forgive me, I had no idea who or how many folks would arrive. Sorry, is that any further questions?
I have a question. I didn't catch the name of the engineering firm.
Kimley Horn.
And where are you based out of?
Our office is based out of Philadelphia.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, I do have another question. When was Effort LLC formed? Exactly, because I saw something about March of 2015.
E4 Solar was established in 2020.
2020.
That's correct, sir.
And why are we just now hearing about all this? Why hasn't anything been disseminated from anyone to people, parties involved?
So respectfully, that's a limited liability company formed for the purpose of developing solar. It formed in 2020. No properties were yet identified. In order for there to be a solar development, properties have to be identified, leased, or optioned to purchase. So there is a time component to do that. and there was nothing to talk about. So when a limited liability company is formed, there's not a requirement to go knock on doors, in the areas where they may be considering developing solar.
So you guys had nothing to do with the large landowners in 2020? You didn't know anything about them, is what you're saying?
I don't know what that question means,
Well,
but
it's almost 500 acres of land, so if you formed this thing, you didn't know about these landowners, is pretty much what I think you're saying, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying.
Sir, I don't, we have, my client has agreements to purchase property. I think, respectfully, I think your issue is with the landowners who have contracted with my client to agree to allow this use to proceed.
No, you said, unless I'm misunderstanding what you said that you formed this corporation, this LLC, but you didn't have any landowners involved at that point, so I don't, at 2020, so I'm asking you, and that you guys didn't know of the landowners at this point.
And that has nothing to do with the conditional use application or what is or is not an issue before the township this evening.
Can you answer the question, yes or no? Did you know of the landowners or didn't you?
That is not a yes or no question. I'll ask questions of my witness to try to help get you an answer to the information you're seeking, but I would have to move on.
All right.
I have a question, just so I understand.
Sir, your name, please?
Douglas Swink, I'm sorry. You formed the LLC as a foreign corporation in 2020, correct? Okay. And you're not answering if you contacted or had agreements with any landowners prior to that. You're not answering that, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And second of all, is this a lease of this property, or are you purchasing all this property?
There are some landowners that we are making an agreement for the option to lease or option to purchase.
Will that information be made public?
That information is part of the conditional use application and was submitted to the township.
The township has that?
Yes, however, financial terms are redacted as that's not.
Absolutely.
Okay. Just to be clear.
Okay. And the fact that the property is in clean and green doesn't affect anything?
So again, not the subject of a conditional use.
Okay, that's fine.
Here,
I'll ask it at a later time.
But if you don't mind, I'll explain to the best of my ability, just so to try and make sure I have a productive discussion.
I'm not a lawyer.
No, that's all right. Ms. Ferrari cut me off at any point. So the clean and green or Act 319 covenant, that's a covenant that a landowner enters into with the county taxing authority, gives a discount on the taxes. So if it will be up to the landowner who would then potentially be in violation. I don't know that solar is a permissible use currently within the 319 covenant. So what would then happen is a rollback tax bill would be created by the County Board of Assessment, establishing what the landowner has to pay back if that Act 319 covenant is breached or violated.
And that would be based on if Effort Solar purchases or leases the property, correct?
Well, it's my understanding is it's based on when the permitted activity ceases on the property, and there's a formula, and I'm sorry I can't quote it, but it's a stacked percentage of taxes for years prior that then become due.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. All right, Darren, can I ask you to pull this? I'm going to hand out packets.
I have 3 additional copies if folks like to. There you go. You're welcome.
first of all,
Darren, could you please state your full name for the board?
My official name is Yong Sung Sun.
But your English name is Darren.
That's correct.
May I call you Darren?
Yes.
And you heard me explain Effort Solar LLC, which is owned by Samsung. And is that a correct statement?
That's correct.
And Effort Solar is the entity that has either an option to lease or option to purchase with the underlying landowners. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that was done sometime after 2020, but prior to our filing of the conditional use application this year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you describe generally the business of Effort Solar?
Effort Solar is aiming for making a generation of the electricity, which is going to be connected to the interconnection grid, which is owned by the utilities. And we do make the power purchase agreement with the utility for providing this electricity.
So if I may, Effort Solar acquires rights to property, then has to secure zoning and land development approval
That's
to develop a solar farm on the property. That's correct?
That's correct.
And along the way, there's what's called an interconnection agreement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And an interconnection agreement is provided by PJM. And what is PJM?
PJM stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland, and they are overseeing the utilities that currently that we are using as utilities.
And that's the entity you must contract with to determine whether the overall power grid can accept power from this facility. Is that correct?
That's correct. Actually, we are making a contract with three parties: utilities, and PJM, and applicant.
So,
sorry, what was the third one?
Applicant, which is Effort Solar LLC.
so an interconnection agreement will come later, but you're in the study period now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But you cannot get an interconnection agreement without having zoning approved. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So this is a necessary step in order for you to secure the interconnection agreement, correct?
That's correct.
But you have had some indication that there's a willingness to accept this project into the power grid, correct?
That's correct.
But we will not have anything firm until after zoning is complete. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But if there's no interconnection agreement, Effort Solar will not build this facility. Is that also correct?
That's correct.
So it's an accurate statement then to say, upon receipt of an interconnection agreement, that can be provided to the township to meet the zoning requirement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm sorry I didn't ask you this further. You've developed solar project elsewhere, is that correct?
That's correct. I have developed and developing the solar farm in other regions, including West Virginia and Virginia, and Ohio and Kentucky.
And can you summarize generally what this solar facility is and what that would look like at the end in a general layperson's understanding?
Solar farm consists of the solar panel, which is standing onto the ground that we have been contracting for the agreement with the landowner. And then that is going to be generating the electricity, which is going to be collected to the substation, which is we are going to construct. And that is going to be interconnected to the interconnection facility, which is owned by the utilities.
So around the outside of the facility, there will be complete buffering, is that correct?
That's correct.
As well as fencing?
That's correct.
So and approximately how tall will the panels be?
A panel could vary in terms of the topography of the site itself, but it would not exceed 35 feet as per the ordinances.
And you would expect it would be much lower, correct?
It would be much lower than that because of the vegetative screening.
And your intention is to completely buffer it so it's not seen from level ground next to it, is that correct?
That's correct.
And as far as, other than the interconnection agreement, Effort Solar will obtain any required licenses from state or federal agencies?
That's correct.
And those are things that they run parallel in schedule with the interconnection agreement, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you don't yet know which utility may take power from this facility, is that correct?
At this point, no.
But it's a correct understanding that power may come from this solar farm, go to the transmission lines, and would be dispersed through the power grid by either PUC or regulated entity in charge of distribution, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now the township ordinances have some insurance requirements, and is Effort Solar willing to provide liability coverage at a minimum of $1 million per occurrence, and property damage coverage at a minimum of $1 million per occurrence, covering the solar facility?
Yes, we will provide the certificate of insurance.
And those can be updated as need be with the township
Yeah.
as policies are renewed. Is that fair?
That's correct.
And then also required, will Effort Solar submit the name, address, and emergency telephone number for the operator of the solar power facility?
Yes, we will.
And then can you summarize how this facility is monitored after completion?
After the completion, there is going to be automatic the equipment which is going to monitor, and there are some people who is going to monitor the generation itself and certain prevent any the risk coming out from the facility itself.
So the facility is connected to forgive me, but an internet monitoring system that remotely monitors 24/7, is that correct?
That's correct.
And if there's a problem, there is somebody designated who can be there quick, correct?
We will, yes.
And then the facility is secured with a full fencing and a locked gate?
That's correct.
And it's typical to give the township fire company or EMS key access or a Knox box, is that correct?
That's correct.
And Effort Solar would agree to that if the township were inclined to approve this, you would agree to that as a condition?
That's correct. We will.
And we're required to comply with Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code, and all electrical components conform to all relevant and applicable electrical codes. Effort Solar will comply with those codes, is that correct?
Yes, we will.
And the panels themselves are designed, and the manufacturer's data provides that they are compliant with those codes, is that correct?
Yes, you will comply with the electromagnetic code standards.
As well. And so if there is a good industry practice to minimize the impact of stray voltage or any EMF interference, Effort Solar will ensure that is done as well, is that correct?
Yes, our equipment are following EMC standards to minimize any impact.
And then, to the extent it can be documented, let me ask you a different way. Are you aware in any way that whether solar facilities interfere with radio, television, telephone, or other reception for nearby properties?
That is not actually the fact itself, but there are some studies that is possibly being interfered, but in accordance with the code that we are going to install our equipment, which is following the standard itself, it is going to minimize any potential interferences.
And if there is a complaint of interference, Effort Solar would come out, investigate, cooperate, and remediate any documented interference that exceeded, say, a federal threshold. Is that correct?
Yes, we will.
Or if there's a township threshold.
We will.
And then, do you understand that Effort Solar, pardon me, sir, excuse me, Jim, I don't want to engage directly with an
Yeah,
audience member.
There's no speaking when the testimony is being given.
Could we share the mic a little bit more? That would help.
Yeah, we can't hear,
I appreciate it.
Mr. Fox, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I can't ask questions because I'm not allowed as an American. I'm sorry, you're a lawyer. You got everything in front of you.
So Darren, will Effort Solar be responsible for mitigating any solar radiation or glare impacts as determined by the township prior to the issuance of any final certificate of approval?
Yes, we will.
And then a glare study was submitted with this application, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then the panels themselves, are they shiny, are they matte finish, what do they look like?
They're actually black surface, which is not shining itself, and actually they are absorbing the sunlight, not reflecting.
And then, as far as any fire suppression systems, is it typical that, say, a fire hydrant or some emergency facility like that would be installed on site, subject to the review and approval of the township? Is that the typical standard?
That's correct. That's correct.
And then Effort Solar will cooperate with the township fire company and emergency services to create an emergency response plan during the land development process. Is that correct?
Yes, we will.
And then you mentioned that at a later date, authorization would come from the relevant utility companies acknowledging and approving connection to the property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that will be provided to the township and would be accepted as a condition of approval as something that has to be done later. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then does Effort Solar agree to comply with the township's tree replacement requirement upon decommissioning?
Yeah.
And it would be acceptable to enter into a decommissioning agreement to document that at the appropriate time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then, we may have already covered this, and I apologize if it's repetitive, but will a phone number and identity of a responsible person for the public or emergency services to contact with inquiries and complaints be available at the township throughout the life of the project?
Yes, we will provide.
And then, will Effort Solar cooperate with the township in any permitting items that have to be completed or complied with at a later date, just by the nature of the utility approval process?
We will.
And then, you're familiar with the surrounding area of the property?
I have walked around the property itself one time.
And then, you're familiar with the buffering plans proposed for the property, is that correct?
That's correct.
The intention is upon completion of the building of the solar facility to buffer that so it's a full buffer around the entire perimeter, is that correct?
That's correct.
And those will be evergreens that could grow up to 30 feet or so upon completion?
That's correct.
And that's acceptable as a condition of approval if the township were so inclined, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then based on your experience developing solar facilities, do you anticipate that there is any sort of burden on utilities or other services of the township?
We do not expect.
And then if the conditional use is approved, do you anticipate compliance with all other township zoning and land development requirements subject to what I'll call technical waivers in the subdivision and land development process?
Yes, we will.
And in other words, we do not anticipate requesting any zoning variances, is that correct?
That's correct.
Right, I thank you very much. I don't have any further questions for Mr. Sun. I would invite the board or other parties to ask questions.
I think what we will do is we will ask parties first if they have any questions, and then the board will go after the parties. And so just, when you stand, please state your name, even if you've already given, just state your name. and speak
Stuart
loudly.
Hotler, you said that they wouldn't be any more than 35 feet high, but you said you expect them to be much lower. Define lower. What do you expect them to be? What height?
Normally, it is built with 6 to 10 feet, but based on topography, it could go up to 20 feet. But
Pretty
it
high.
was still undercovered with the vegetative screening from the outskirts.
Okay, so the vegetation you're going to plant in front of all of that is going to be, you're going to get larger trees immediately. They're not going to be little tiny.
It would take some time to grow.
So it's small. It's going to be small plants.
Yes, but
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
yeah, but it takes about 3 to 5 years to fully grow.
Okay.
So we normally choose the vegetation which is growing very fast. But from the starting point, we do expect that, like, even if the tree itself is going to be small, it will cover some portion of the fence itself and the facility itself.
I see. Also, everything I have read about solar panel farms says that they are supposed to be 1,000 to 1,500 feet away from existing properties. Is that going to be the case?
In this case, we are following the zoning ordinances, which we are making a setback from the property 100 feet, and we are.
100.
That's correct.
Only 100.
The boundary itself.
All right, because everything I've read says it has to be at least 1,000 feet away.
What I tried to say is that we are actually following the zoning ordinances of the township, which is, we are going to comply with that totally.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Douglas Swain. I have a question. I'm not sure which one, this might be for your electrical engineer, it might be for the attorney, I don't know.
Okay.
Are your panels UL or Canadian listed? Are you the manufacturer, Samsung, of the panels?
We do not.
Okay. The panels that you will be buying, are they UL listed or CA listed for Canada?
Normally, we do use the solar named the Trina Solar.
Okay, but are they UL listed? Underwriters Laboratory, it's a lifting agency in the Pennsylvania or United States that tests all electrical equipment. Will they be UL listed?
Yes. What we are expecting to getting a construction with is the U.S. base.
Construction has nothing to do with the panels themselves.
That's correct.
Will they be UL listed?
UL listed.
Yes.
UL. Yeah, that will be yes.
They will.
Yes.
Are they fixed or are they fixed or are they move? Are these the panels that move with the sun or are they fixed?
It's going to follow the sun.
So they will be moving.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. These will not be ground mounted, they will be pedestal mounted, correct?
That is going to be ground mounted.
No, but I mean, your solar panels themselves will be on pedestals that will follow the sun, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Will your panels follow the grade of the land, or will they be in an even plane?
They're going to follow the grade itself.
When you go to the power company for your permit to connection, is that a public hearing, do you know?
There is no public hearing.
It's just an application, they approve it
Observation and the study.
based on need, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. And you're not connected with the power plant or the solar panels they're putting in Pocono Township, that's not Samsung?
The substation that you're referring is?
No, they're putting in a solar farm in Pocono Township. Is that also Samsung or no?
That's
Okay.
not.
The substations, will they be located in Polk Township or Chestnut Hill Township, and how many will there be?
They're going to be established in Chestnut Hill Township, not Polk Township, and the size of it is going to be around 5 to 10 acres.
Is that located on your application?
That is addressed in.
I know this is Polk Township, but is that shown on here?
That's right.
Substations are going?
Yes.
How many megawatt system is this?
We are expecting 90 megawatt AC.
Okay. And I have a question, and again, you might not know the answer to this. You talk a lot about fire safety, are these things known to be a fire issue, or we have no, and you might not know this, we don't have public water where you're building this.
Right.
So you have to put in a generator and a pump and probably a water tower, whatever, but are these things, you don't fight electrical fires with water, so how do you put the fire out if there's a fire?
Actually, in a previous experience that we have dealt with, is that we are going to put, to turn down all the electricity system, and
I
then,
didn't understand what you say it again, I'm sorry.
I think, yeah. Can you hear me well?
I couldn't understand what you said, I heard you, I'm sorry.
It's okay. So
I talk funny, go ahead.
we are going to shut down all the electricity from the grid, and then we are going to keep the electricity from the grid, and the fire itself is going to be burned from the small spot, and they're going to be extinguished naturally.
So you let it burn out?
That's correct.
You
Because
you don't put a fire out, you let it burn out?
Because like you said, sir,
I understand.
if you're putting a water on it,
No,
this
right.
is going to be
But there's a foam you could put on it that would put it out.
Yeah, that's correct. We are going to plan to mitigate as well.
Is
So
the
you-
fire
so-
company trained for that?
I'm still talking, so let me finish my question. That's okay, let me. So you talked about putting fire hydrants in to put out a fire which you can't use water on. So is your plan to use the foam to put out a fire or to let it burn itself out? I mean, accidents do happen, and I'm not saying, I understand that.
Yeah, there are several types of, we are going to extinguish the fire from itself. One of them is letting it burn.
Okay.
And another one is like making a form around it. Yeah, so letting it burn as well. So the methodology is going to be the same.
I've got another question, but I can't read what I wrote, so I'll have to come back to you later. But thank you, thank you.
No worries, thank you.
Yes, sir. Mark Martini, so you were saying about it, it's sitting there, you would let it burn out. What happens to all the chemicals and the hazardous material that's inside them panels while it's just burning out?
The
Climate change.
the component of the solar panel is actually the silicone, which is a natural component of the earth.
Right.
So even if it is burned, we are expecting there's no harm around the surrounding area to be exposed to the chemical or any environmental impact from it.
I understand that, but you're saying, so there's no chance whatsoever while you're just letting it burn that there's hazardous material that's coming out into the air for us to breathe? As close as we are?
Ain't on a farm? I mean, like.
You have to wait for the end there, it's like,
I'm sorry.
no, you gotta wait for the end, because you're not on the thing, you should let it.
Yeah. Could you repeat that again, sir?
What I said is, you were saying about the silicone, which is all natural, and I get that, that's not my issue. My issue is that you're gonna have that, and you're just gonna let it burn. There's no hazardous material that could, by chance, get off into the air for us to breathe.
We have not faced any like the severe the air pollution coming out from the burn itself, and which is not reported from the neighborhood in a previous experience.
Okay, did it go into the groundwater or into the, your soil and stuff, and then get into the water?
That is also included in our decommissioning plan. So everything is going to be recovered fully after the facility is going to be operated, cease operation.
Right, so that's after the fact that it happened. Like, you're saying that when it happens and after it happens, then we'll do this afterwards, but you're not, after it happens, it's too late. You get me?
I got you, sir.
Okay.
And there's a mitigation plan. We are going to make I understand your concern, and we are going to do everything to minimize and like make it zero to impact to the neighborhood, sir.
Right. And how much, I was reading up that solar panels give off, heat, that your temperature rises in that area from solar panels, and by the sounds of it, having the amount that we're gonna have around, it's, in excess of like 4 to 5 degrees difference in that area because the solar panels from, and the heat that it gives off.
That is, I think that is the engineering company. Could you answer the question?
Why
Why don't we wait until the engineer testifies and then you can ask that question?
Oh, my fault, okay.
I'm sorry, sir.
You gotta wait till one.
Well, am I considered part of the party if I'm married to my husband? No? Okay, I'll wait.
Yes, sir.
I have another question. On the substation, again, this might not be your question. Sorry, Doug Swank, I'm sorry.
I understand, but there's a lot of noise going on here,
Yeah.
and it is now ceasing, so go ahead.
The substations that are being built in Chestnut Hill Township,
Chestnut Hill.
and there are going to be 2 substations, correct?
Once, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Switching substation and, yeah, integration
Okay.
substation.
I don't think the township has an ordinance on noise coming out of the substation. What will the decibel reading be on those substations, the noise level? Or is that something for the electrical engineer to answer? I mean, I can wait, I didn't know who would answer it, that's the reason why I asked that. He
Okay.
doesn't know either.
Yeah, I think after the testimony of the engineer
Okay.
company, yeah, we could answer that question.
I got one more question. Mark Martini. The batteries that are gonna be in there, are they lithium batteries that are gonna be in the substations, or?
Currently, we are not expecting the battery is going to be built concurrently with the, yeah, we are targeting for the solar panel only.
Doug Swank, one more question, then I'll shut up. These panels move with the sun.
That's correct.
I believe the attorney made a comment there that they will not cause any glare, or somebody did. How can you guarantee that when they move, that they won't glare into somebody's window? Is there, I mean, how do you prevent that, I guess is my question.
We have comments already for the glare study from the about 190 spot around the area. And
Say that again, I'm sorry.
we have assessed already for the study of the glare study, which is surrounding area of the prospect, the site itself. And we have concluded that there will be like 0 to minimum impact to the from the glare itself.
Even as they rotate, there'll be
That's
no,
correct.
even like when they're making that multi-degree pitch, it's a small pitch, that there's not gonna be, you're sure there'll be no glare.
So, Mr. Swank, we had a glare study commissioned and submitted. At the next hearing, we'll bring the person that prepared that study, and they can summarize and answer these questions accurately without,
No, I understand.
yeah, we'll get the appropriate expert.
And maybe you, as Mr. Fox, you can answer this. Was the glare study prepared for units that move or units that are stationary?
It was prepared based on the plans for the application, which I understand to be the rotating panels, and we'll make sure that that is confirmed and accurate, and get you somebody here to answer your questions.
And who did that study? What firm, do you know?
Yes.
I mean, if you don't have it, you can email it to me, I'm fine with that.
It is Pure Power Engineering from Hoboken, New Jersey.
And I have one more question, this might be for the electrical. I'm not sure what the township's current code is it used for electrical. What will your design or what will your panels be based on? The 2022 code or the township code that they've adopted? And it's not a trick question. This is what I do for a living.
Understood.
Let's wait, again, can we wait till the engineer
And that's fine. I didn't know if Mr. Samsung, the guy from Samsung would know, or the engineer. I didn't know.
All right, that's fine.
Because there's going to be, that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the participants?
Mike McMurtry. Couple of questions. On emergency response, you had indicated that there would be a person who would be available, and it would be a quick response. What is the time standard for that so-called quick response?
How fast does your designated person respond or get to the site in the event of an emergency or complaint?
Is that, yes.
It varies per the site itself and the ordinances, and we typically keep within 3 hours.
The attorney mentioned that there were a number of items that you have that are going to will comply with the ordinances it requires under the conditional use permit. However, a number of those items seem to be things that could have been addressed prior to or in connection with the submission. A couple of those I'd just like to point out are the fire protection study. I would expect those plans to be reasonably well developed. Obviously, they'd have to change as the project may be revised, but not sure why something couldn't have been provided with the application in regards to that. A certificate of insurance are generally pretty simple to acquire. The premium, I'm sure at this stage would be quite minimal, so not sure why that wasn't included as part of the application. A couple of the other items, I guess the RFI study you're saying has to wait until the solar panels are in place. Is that the thought process behind that item not being addressed from the ordinance?
Yeah, we'll have our engineer talk about the fire protection study. The certificates of insurance, there's nothing to insure yet, right? There's no solar, nothing is built, nothing's been approved and thereby nothing's been built. And then the RFI study, there's a standard, but without the facility there, and it's my understanding, and if I'm mistaken, I'll count on my expert to correct me, but those are standards that have to be complied with. They're not measurable unless there's a facility or a panel there to measure.
Well, understood. On the buffering, I know that you supplementally had submitted a buffering plan. I haven't had a chance to take a look at it, but do you know whether that takes into account changes of elevation for the properties in question? For example, my property is on a continuous slope along a ridge, so parts of the solar farm are going to be quite a bit above where my property is, as well as quite below it. So the buffering will be greatly affected by those changes in elevation and what impact that will have on my particular property. Do you know that was addressed in the buffering plan that was included in here?
So if you don't mind,
wait till
once we have Tom testify and we have a plan, we can orient.
Yep.
What I can't do, I can't honestly say that depending on elevation, some people may see this. It's an elevation question, and that's, we can minimize it and mitigate it, but I can't guarantee, and I don't think Tom will be able to guarantee that we can do that, just given some of the elevation that exists. But we certainly meet the ordinance requirements. I think we've gone above the requirements, but I can't promise something that would be true.
Okay. And then I had some similar questions on the flare study. Is that something that would have to wait till you have that person available to answer questions?
We'll bring them in, but we'll happily take the questions if you like.
And the question is essentially the same. When I looked at the glare study that was submitted with the application, the particular spots around my property were all taken at a lower elevation below where my house is, and I didn't see any glare study spots that were above the elevation where my house is. So again, that angle and the differences in that, I think, would provide different or potentially different answers that would need to be addressed to be adequately assessed. So, the last thing I had a question on was the Effort Solar's lease of the property. There are essentially two leases and an option, or two options to lease and an option to purchase that were included as part of the application. The options to lease do not include any details regarding the term of the underlying leases that might be entered into should this project go forward and the options be exercised. While the options themselves have limited periods, one of them expiring in September with a 2-year option to renew, and the other, I think, followed by 2 years, so that's 2 years farther out. Is there any sense or is there any firm indication of what those lease term periods that they plan to enter into, what the options are for us to be able to evaluate, or where will a sample lease be provided, further provided with the application to assess those terms?
In other words, what's the typical lease term for a solar facility? Can you answer that, Darren?
For this project specifically, we are, like you said, sir, it is 3+1+1 option agreement. So we are we do have the right to extend our option period to maximum 2 years, and then within that period, we are having our right to execute our the lease option. So.
How long is the actual lease? How long does Effort Solar want to lease this property?
The actual lease itself is up to maximum that the Pennsylvania jurisdiction has allowed, which is going to be maximum 39 years.
That's all my questions for them.
Hi, Stuart Hochberg. Did maybe I heard incorrectly, the gentleman asked something about how long the response time is to address fire in the farm field, and you said up to 3 hours? No.
That is correct. Yeah, that is maximum time for the reaction.
Maximum?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of unacceptable if you live right across from that, and somebody should be addressing that immediately.
Yes, I understand your concern, sir. And we are going to re-examine our the time period for the reaction time, and we are going to present it again.
I'm sorry, you were going to?
Present it again.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mark Martin, do solar farms and these panels, do they have any effect on our property values? I'm just curious. I don't know when.
So I'm not a real estate appraiser. I'm just a lawyer. So I don't have an answer for you tonight, but we'll provide, as far as value, and understood anybody telling you what it impacts.
Right, I get it. I mean, I look right on the phone or on the, Google or whatever, and Google says whatever. I just want to hear it come out of you guys' mouth, that's all.
Yeah, and look, I live across the street from a quarry at my home, so I mean, I understand the impact of use and.
But was the quarry there when you bought your home?
Yes, but since operations have expanded, but this is a change. We recognize that this is a change.
Well, that's fine, but what is the need for this amount and this broad? Like our area, our town, our whatever, we're not gonna be benefiting from any of this. We don't need this much electricity, so who's benefiting?
No, understood. And the zoning ordinance provides that it is permitted by conditional use. The power, it doesn't necessarily go to the immediate community. It depends on where there is a need in the power grid. So what we hope to show is that we meet all the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and that including the general and specific criteria to mitigate against any impacts. I can't promise that there are absolutely no impacts, but we can meet the standards of the zoning ordinance. And I understand that probably sounds like a non-answer, because I can't,
Okay, that's fine. I appreciate you. I get, trust me, I do. Is the landowner that's leasing it to you guys, are they gonna be like reaping any benefits as far as kickbacks for going green in their area?
I don't know, and respectfully, that's
that's an agreement that any financial terms, we can't disclose.
Yeah, they're gonna be getting kickbacks, or township getting kickbacks, and we're gonna be losing value to our house.
That's right.
I can assure you that as part of the zoning process, there are absolutely no quote kickbacks or any payments. I would be
Grants, I should reword my word, grants or yeah.
I'm not aware of any grants, but that's something if we can provide an answer, but I don't think that's the subject of the application.
Okay, I appreciate you, thank you.
Douglas White, a question for the Samsung dude. What's the life expectancy of these panels? Over 20 years?
That's correct, sir.
23 years, is that about what they are?
We are expecting more than that, actually. It is going to be up, of course, during the operation time. It is supposed to be maintained, but as you said, like we are aiming for 20 to 25.
Okay, and I have a question about zoning. Are you guys allowed to answer any questions?
Not at this time.
Not at this time? Okay. At what time will they be able to ask about zoning questions?
This is a hearing where the applicant presents their evidence, and you can come to a public meeting other than this hearing and ask questions of the Board of Supervisors. There's going to be there will be a public meeting between now and the next hearing, which you're welcome to come to.
Okay. Sorry, Mike McMurtry again. Just wanted to follow up because I don't remember whether Mr. Ferrari said that or the attorney, excuse me, the attorney had mentioned that because this project spans both Polk and Chestnut, are the two dependent upon each other, or will the Polk piece continue if the Chestnut Hill Township piece happen to not be approved?
Like I said, it is a prerequisite for the generation interconnection agreement with the utility and the PJM. So we need to acquire both a conditional use permit from both of the township.
Are there any other questions?
Joe Balzano. You had mentioned earlier there's 3 parties that are involved in this corporation with Effort Solar. Are they corporations or are they just part of LLC?
We are LLC.
Okay, so the limited liability corporation cannot be sued. I'm trying to figure out where does the liability going to lie for us, the homeowners that live close by this?
That's not true. Limited liability companies will sue just like a corporation.
Okay, so my question, I'm amazed you couldn't answer the other question, but you can answer this question for me. What happens in the future for some unforeseen thing that nobody knows what happens tomorrow? If there is an issue, where's the liability going to end for Effort Solar?
The project, we are a project company, as the limited liability company, as you mentioned, sir. We are going to be liable for the project itself. So we are the one.
For the project itself?
Yes, right, sir.
What happens when it impacts any of the homeowners? Are we going to be able to go back to Effort Woodcraft? Can I go back to Effort Solar and say to you, well, your building is from a burnt out solar panel that's made the side of my house black?
Sir,
Respectfully, you're asking my client to give a legal conclusion. If there is an event that occurs that you would have to, Effort Solar would be the party that would be responsible. Without any specific, it's a hypothetical that I don't know that can be answered in a manner that's going to be satisfactory. But if this is approved through zoning, there will be a subdivision and land development process whereby agreements will be between Effort Solar and the township that are recorded against the property that state exactly how this property has to be operated.
and in addition to the requirements of the township zoning ordinance and any other applicable laws, codes, standards, etc. So yes, could Effort Solar be sued? Sure. They're an entity that will be the project owner, and they'll have you would have, if there was an event to occur, you would have the requisite standing to bring a suit. I can't tell you whether or not that will be successful, but I'm trying to answer the question as best we can.
In the future, are you going to reiterate those two companies that you had mentioned that's involved with Effort Solar? You said there were two other parties that are involved in this?
I think what was mentioned, you had talked about who's involved with the interconnection agreement. It's PJM and the electric utility.
Okay.
And Effort Solar, and Darren, am I correct? Effort Solar is owned by a Samsung affiliate, correct?
Samsung Renewable.
Okay.
Can you state that again?
Yes, E4 Solar LLC is totally owned by the Samsung Renewable LLC.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Doug Swank, who owns Samsung Renewable? Who owns the company down the line? Do they ultimately end back up to Samsung, I can't talk like you. Samsung Limited out of I think it's Japan.
Okay, yeah.
Is that where it ultimately ends up? Is that how it's?
That's correct, sir. I will going to rephrase that. E4 Solar is owned by Samsung Renewable LLC, which is owned by Samsung CNT America, which is owned by Samsung CNT.
Which is owned by Samsung Limited, correct?
That is not within a company actually. That is a public company of Korea, and is owning Samsung America.
The public company from Korea owns Samsung America.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody recognized by authority? Okay, hearing none, at this time I would ask members of the Board of Supervisors, do you have any questions?
I just have one question, or two questions. So what would the height of the fence that would surround all of this project be? And would the screening evergreens be higher than that fence?
Fence itself is going to be higher than the solar panel itself, so we are targeting to be, so the purpose of the fence itself is keeping away from the outcomer. So our standard is 10 to 15 feet for the fence itself, and like you said, sir, the vegetation screening is up to 30 feet. So it should totally cover the fence itself, sir.
What's the starting height when you plant them originally?
The plantation itself is going to be starting from the 7 feet, but it could grow up to 30 feet, sir.
Okay. And my other question would be, assuming this project would jump all the hurdles that are necessary, how long before you would think that this would actually be operational?
Considering we are successfully acquiring the conditional use permit from both the township and get a generation interconnection agreement with the PJM and the local utilities, our starting for the construction date is expected to be 2025, first quarter, and commercial operation date is expected to be 2026.
So how long do you think this facility would be operational?
This facility is expected to be operational up until its life expectancy, like Sir said. It is normally 25 years, but we are going to make a maintenance. So we are trying to maximize the life expectancy to the 40 years, less than the ordinances or the state regulates.
My only question would be posting and bonding of the roadways.
I can't hear you. people.
I'm sorry, I've been sick for 6 weeks. I'm really trying.
Okay.
Posting and bonding of the road for damage done during construction would be my biggest concern. Bear Road, Long Mountain. Is there any pushback? I imagine you would post a bond.
So if, for the construction period, would Effort Solar be willing to post a bond against any potential damage to the roadways surrounding the project?
If there's any actual the damage from the road itself, we are going to recover it in real expenses from our expenses. But as long as the ordinances is not asking for it, we do not plan to open the bond itself, but we are going to recover the damaged road itself, sir.
Okay, I guess we'd have to have some kind of agreement because we have logging companies that log, and from what I understand, there's an area that's gonna be logged, and they post a bond, so we'll have to come up with some kind of agreement.
So during the, if we were to get conditional use approval,
I would expect that all of that to be addressed in a land development agreement, recorded against the property pursuant to the township's ordinances, practices, fee schedules, requirements, as well as Pennsylvania municipalized planning code. So something that we have to discuss and deal with, and if that's the practice of the township, it's required, that has to be followed.
I just have one or two questions, sir. The ordinance requires that upon decommissioning of the facility, that trees are replaced that were taken down initially when the facility was built. And there has to be a tree replacement on a one-to-one basis based upon the certain size of the tree. And my question is, does your company plan on doing any type of survey of the trees that are there so that you know what you have to replace when the facility is decommissioned?
Yes, to meet the ordinances requiring the decommission bond and the tree recovery itself, we are willing to do a survey for the tree which is going to be affected by that.
Okay. And with respect to the height of the panels, I think you referenced that the maximum height of the panel would be 20 feet.
That is what the standard that we've been using for the construction so far.
Based upon your knowledge of the property, could you tell us what the average height of the panel might be?
Panel itself is from the 10 feet to 15 feet.
If you can say, what percentage of the panels would be 20 feet? Approximately, I'm not holding you to an exact number.
It totally varies with the project itself and considering the Polk Township, the solar project we are targeting is quite hilly, so we are trying to minimize the height of the panel, so it could impact the least to the adjacent property. But yeah, I cannot say the number.
Can you tell us that there would be no panel higher than 20 feet?
As long as the ordinance is asking for us to keep it, we are going to follow it, but at this point I cannot guarantee that it is going to be higher than less than 20 feet.
If there was a conditional use approval that the maximum height would be 20 feet, could you abide by that?
Yes, if the conditional use permit is asking us to limit the 20 feet of the solar panel, we would abide it.
Mr. Hurley has a question.
Maintenance, as far as mowing and keeping it all neat, is there anything on the ground? I mean, weed barrier, or is it just you going to a contract with a landscaping company to keep it under control?
We are using various the methodology to keep it grazed. One of the grazing methodology we are using is the sheep grazing. So we are actually growing in the field of the solar panel. We are growing the sheep, which is like living next to the solar panel, which is grazing naturally. Yeah, and that's one of them, and that could be varied as per the circumstances that the site of the solar panel is located.
Anything else? Okay, Mr. Fox, do you have any rebuttals, questions?
None, but I'd like to reserve the right to recall him as needed, and we want to make sure to give every party the opportunity to ask all the questions, so Darren's available.
Will Darren be at the next hearing?
Yes. Yes, I will.
Can I ask a follow-up question to your question?
Yes, sir.
Doug Swank, the height of the panel, you were asking size of the panels.
No, I was asking height.
I thought you said size, I'm sorry, we couldn't hear you very well.
Okay.
Okay, so the size of the panel will not exceed 20 foot when it's extended to follow the sun, is that correct? I'm asking you.
Oh, that is not what I was answering to him.
Right.
Actually, that was the height that I was mentioning.
That's the height of the mounting height.
Yeah, mounted height.
Right, but the panel's pivot. What is the height of the pivot? The pivot is, the panel's mounted here and it pivots. What is this height? Could be,
It varies from 3 to 5 feet.
no.
It's going to be
Okay, if you mount the panel at 20 foot on a pole,
Yeah.
on the mounting hardware, and the panel is 10 to 15 foot, correct?
Panel itself, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 to 15, sir.
Let's say 10 foot. When the panel tilts, the top of that panel is going to be correct 25 foot.
No, actually, that is not
The standard that we are going to follow.
But
That is
how we are calculating the height of it is from the bottom, the ground, to the top. Not the top of the panel itself, but at the center that the panel is.
So the panel will actually be higher than 20 foot at some spots.
It could possibly, yeah.
Correct. And I got a zoning question, they can't answer it.
All right, we all in with the participants' questions? All right, then why don't, Mr. Fox, why don't you move on to the next witness? I would say at this point that it is now 7:37. This witness probably is going to be as long as the first witness, and my recommendation, if Mr. Fox concurs, is to adjourn this at the conclusion of his testimony and asking him questions, and then we will reconvene on the date that I indicated before.
Yeah, and you had, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you'd indicate 9 o'clock curfew.
Right.
Yeah, and each of our witnesses will be back at the next hearing, and we do anticipate bringing some supplemental and additional testimony as well.
Very well, thank you.
So thank you. Tom, can you please state your full name and professional qualifications?
Is that working? Okay. My name is Tom Katelhan. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Can you spell your last name, sir?
Sure thing. It's Katelhon.
And you do hold a professional engineering license in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
That is correct.
And you previously testified before governing bodies and zoning hearing boards as an expert in the field of civil engineering?
That is correct.
And your firm prepared these plans, and you assisted in preparing these plans before the board this evening, is that correct?
That is correct.
If I may, I'd like to have Mr. Katelhorn admitted as an expert in the field of civil engineering.
Since he's a licensed physical engineer in the Commonwealth, I would advise the board to concur with that. He's so recognized.
Thank you. So, Tom, in preparation of the plans, you also reviewed the Polk Township zoning ordinance, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you also reviewed a township engineer letter dated July 7th, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And based upon your review, we'll go through each comment, and this is at tab 4 of Exhibit A1. Everything is either a will comply, do comply, or will comply in the future for things that apply to the conditional use permit. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And we prepared some additional plans for the board to review this evening. Is that correct?
Yes, we have.
And can you
Do we have the ability to show those on the screen?
I can try it right now.
So, and this is the same as page 1 of tab A1. So if you go back, please highlight with the cursor the Polk Township portion of the plan.
So there's this diagonal line that runs, so if my cursor's up here, moving southeast, so everything on the west side of this line is Polk Township.
And see sheet Z1, Z02, Z03. There's also additional scale plans to delineate some of the comments in the township engineer review letter. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So what was done and what are we showing on those scale plans?
So the scale plans, original submission, the plans were at about 1 to 250 feet. So what we did was provide plans at 1 to 100 feet to provide more detail to the zoning plan, to provide further clarity of the improvements on the site, and to make the review more clear for the reviewer and for the supervisor.
And so these also delineate the areas that are leased, the parcel areas, and the projected site areas. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And they also further delineate where the project is proposed within the R2 zoning. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then they also delineate the minimum area and dimensional requirements under the zoning ordinance for each parcel. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And we're well above the minimum 50 acre requirement on this site. We're about 200 acres. Is that correct?
About 200 on Polk Township side. That's correct.
And then the parcels required to be not more than 3 miles from a utility substation. So this is proposed to be constructed within Chestnut Hill Township. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Approximately how far? Approximately.
I would say approximately 300 feet.
And not to be wise, but less than the 3 mile requirement, correct?
That is correct.
And the zoning ordinance requires a 100-foot property line setback from all solar collectors and related facilities. Is that delineated on the plan?
That is delineated on the plan. If we zoom in a little bit, you can see the magenta line here is the property line for the subject parcel. And then this is sheet Z01. And just as an example, the magenta line with the 2 dashes represents the property line. There's a dash line 100 feet into the property, which represents the setback line.
And in several areas of the property, that setback is much greater than 100 feet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So can you highlight the areas of the plan that would only have closer to the 100-foot setback?
So I would say where it would be closest to the 100-foot setback would be near Long Mountain Road. However, here we do adhere to a 130-foot setback due to the ultimate right-of-way being 60 feet for the public road.
And is that the smallest setback area on the plan?
Yes.
And then what's the largest setback area on the plan? You can say approximately is fine.
Approximately, if we zoom out a little bit, I would say, looking at the north side of the property, and I do apologize, I'm usually using a mouse, we're about 200 to 300 feet buffered from Bear Road to the north.
Thank you. So then a maximum lot coverage of 75% is permitted. Are we in compliance as shown on the plans for each of the properties that the percentage lot coverage is less than 75%?
We are in compliance, and this again is Plan Z00. We provide a project parcel table in the northwest corner, providing the projected lot coverage for each individual parcel.
I see the largest parcel is one of the Baumgartner parcels Last parcel ID number .21 is 50.03% is the highest lot coverage.
That is correct.
So again, much less than 75%
Yes.
is permitted.
Yes.
And part of this is natural resources and existing conditions of the site, is that correct?
That is correct.
But in any event, less than is allowed by ordinance.
That is correct.
And in your expert opinion, that also mitigates against concerns, stormwater, runoff, things like that, because there's much less than the maximum allowable lot coverage, is that correct?
That is correct.
In other words, it's less of a stormwater management system is required because we're not up against the lot coverage threshold, is that correct?
That is correct.
And while we're on that subject, to get off the ordinance requirements, talk about topography and which way the site grades and drains.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we focus here on the main parcel on Polk Township, and I do believe we have topography on the supplemental insets. While it's a little hard to kind of gauge at this high level.
Is that Z02?
This is Z02, yes. If I zoom in here, we should be able to see a ridge within the topography. It is a bit hard to see on these plans, so I'm just going to go back to Z00. The ridge, or the high point in this project, if you see my cursor, it kind of runs along the center of the Bumgarner property and the High Lowry property, actually where they bisect. At this ridge, we have runoff running north to northwest to this existing stream at the north end of the High Lowry property.
And do I see proposed stormwater management facilities already estimated for design?
Yeah, so we have dedicated space for stormwater management facilities. At this time, it is preliminary and conceptual and will be further designed in the land development process, but these areas are dedicated for the stormwater management control, whether it's through stormwater infiltration basins or detention basins that matter.
And part of designing stormwater for a solar facility is unique in that this is not a parking lot or a deck or a uniform structure. It's a series of tilted arrays that collect runoff, that have runoff, and it runs under each array in front of it. Is that correct?
That is correct. So for a property like this, really when it comes to impervious area that generates more runoff, where we see that happening on these properties, it generally comes from the proposed access roads that we have circulating through the site. Now I'm going to zoom in on Z00. You can see we have these gray hatched areas. These are 12-foot wide driving access roads. This is for vehicles to circulate after construction, to circulate around the site for maintenance purposes, and also for emergency and fire services as well. These gravel roads are really the only impervious improvements that we provide on the site. In terms of the rest of the site, right now the site is wooded and agricultural. In post-construction conditions, the site will be a meadow condition, so a fairly dense vegetation below the solar panels. Since the solar panels will be tilted, any type of runoff or storm events will run off of the solar panels and then fall onto the meadow land. So with that being said, from the rain events, runoff will still be going through the meadow lands where natural recharge of the groundwater would be occurring.
So in other words, unlike say a parking lot or a completely impervious surface, water doesn't collect and accelerate the same way across an impervious surface. It runs into the ground along the way before eventually reaching a collection point if needed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you've designed other solar facilities and are confident that that will be the case in this instance?
That is correct.
And we had some questions from parties, but can you give the overall sense of the stormwater management review, stop at the township and land development, PDS, things like that, just to establish that this will be thoroughly reviewed for stormwater management and runoff.
Yep. So stormwater management is both reviewed at a township level and at the PA/DEP level. At the township level, we must adhere to the township subdivision and land development ordinance, which generally proposes a stormwater ordinance. That is one ordinance that we need to adhere to in order to have recommendation for approval. But along with that ordinance, we also must comply with Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection requirements out of the Chapter 102 NIPD's permitting regulations. So it will be very thoroughly reviewed by many different parties before we receive approval on our design.
Thank you. And to go back to the review letter, and thank you for that summary. We're required to show that the height of the solar collector arrays be limited to a maximum of 35 feet. I believe you provided a detail sheet showing a height of less than 35 feet. Can you show the board and the parties?
So,
sheet Z05.
So on sheet Z05, I know it's pretty faint, and I do apologize for that. It was just a bit of a publishing nuance for us. But you can see here is a tracker. I do wish it was a little bit more dark, but as you can see here, we have a finished grade. It's this line kind of running parallel with my cursor. You can see here's the foundational pole for the modules, and then the solar panel itself will lie at an angle on top of that foundational pile. With this schematic, you can see we're proposing 20-foot maximum tracker height with an 18-inch minimum reveal, which this minimum height helps promote vegetative growth beneath the solar panels.
And that also helps with the stormwater management of the site. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So in any event, even with the tracking and tilting, it's below 35 feet, but it's proposed to be 20 feet or less.
That is correct.
And we had some testimony earlier from there regarding the fence. Can you show sheet 04 providing indeed that a chain link fence and access gates for the height of 8 to 9 feet without barbed wire is provided, and explain the details and how that will run around the perimeter of the facility?
Yep, absolutely. So on sheet Z04, if you look at detail 1, which is a typical fencing detail, we are proposing an 8-foot high chain link fence with a double swing gate. The chain link fence also provides a Knox box at the gate for emergency access if needed. The goal of the chain link fence is to provide a perimeter around the solar facility for security reasons. And so if we go back to C00, the line type I am looking at that I'll highlight is this line type with an X. This fence line type, as you can see, will be the perimeter of the entire solar facility, which is hashed in this gray area. So the fence will be enclosing the solar site from the public.
And buffering is proposed on the exterior of the fence, is that correct?
That is correct.
And can you show some details as to the composition and what that buffering would look like?
So I'm going to page L00 within the zoning plans. And first I'll just go to the legend here in the top right corner. So this kind of cloud shape in the legend provides a 20-foot vegetative buffer. And so if we go to the landscape plan.
And I'm sorry, is that that's not 20 feet in height, that's 20 feet in width or depth?
That would be 20 feet in width, yes. And just a closer look at the detail, it would be a 20-foot wide double row of evergreen trees following the perimeter of the fence line.
And is that on all or a portion of the property?
So this will be on a portion of the property, and the only reason for that is that further west, on the west side of this property, is already so densely vegetated that the woods are kind of providing that screening itself, where you will not be able to see the panels. So we have proposed vegetative screening in areas where the site would be visible without this improvement, which is mainly along Long Mountain Road.
But in any event, it's your belief that this complies with requirements of the zoning ordinance, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you heard earlier testimony that these are planted approximately 8 to 10 feet in height initially?
That is correct. It can vary, depending on where it is bought, but it can be bought at 8 to 10 feet to start.
And then we'll go to a height of maximum approximately 30 feet, is that correct?
Yeah, so the Pennsylvania native species that we provide reach a maximum height of 30 feet, mature height.
And then your office is not involved necessarily in the licensing from federal agencies, but is your understanding and belief that all required permits and licenses will be obtained? Can you detail any outside agency permits that your office would be required to participate in, be it NPDS or other?
Yep, so NPDS permitting would be one of the larger outside agency permits that we would have to require. At this moment, in terms of PennDOT permitting, that would not be required for this project since we're adjacent to only township roads. Other permitting such as wetland and stream permitting may be obtained if needed as we further the design along and land development, but at this stage is not needed. But we will have all those permits in hand if necessary before final approval.
And those are not things we can get prior to conditional use approval, is that correct?
That is correct.
So this is the first step in a series of many if this facility is going to be built, is that correct?
That is correct.
Zoning ordinance requires that adequate parking be provided for maintenance workers. Can you discuss how that is proposed and whether or not that's necessary on this property?
Definitely. So with solar development after construction, there's not a lot of traffic that enters the site. Generally, it's just a maintenance vehicle that's circulating the site to make sure things are in order. At this time, we do not provide specific areas for parking. However, on these access roads, there is enough area for a vehicle to say park their car, inspect anything that needs to be inspected, and then and drive back throughout the access facility and back to the public road. And I do not believe there is a parking requirement for solar farms at this moment, but we have seen that there's adequate room for the use of this project without a dedicated parking space.
But if need be, an area could be delineated along a gravel access road to provide for a maintenance worker and also show that emergency services vehicles can access whether the maintenance worker is there or not. Is that correct?
That is correct. We would absolutely comply with that.
And then to anticipate questions during the construction process, typically during a land development application or land development plans, there's a construction detail sheet which might show staging in an area for vehicles and deliveries. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But again, that's not something that's provided now. That's part of the land development process. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And is it a fair assumption, because again, using the lot coverage of 50%, not using the entirety of the property, there's ample room, if need be, to be flexible and move things around when land development comes to make sure we do comply with all of these types of requirements. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And again, your office does not prepare documentation that radio, television, telephone, or reception of similar signals will not be disturbed or diminished, but it's your understanding that this project will comply in all respects. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then you did not prepare the glare study, but that was submitted with this application, and is it your understanding that we will provide testimony that the glare study meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance?
Yes, that is correct.
So it will comply, correct?
Yes, correct.
And then one requirement is that a solar power facility may not be located within 500 feet of any structures. A historic and archaeological review was prepared for this project, is that correct?
That is correct.
And is it a fair summary that no registered or registered eligible resources are located within 500 feet of the property?
Yes, that is correct.
And you base that upon your review of the study that was submitted along with this application, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And then we are required to show that the standard certifications of codes required, for instance, electrical code, building code, those will comply items and comply at the appropriate time, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And then we heard some testimony this evening regarding the fire suppression system. Do not put an electrical fire out with water, but an emergency services response plan will have to be provided, and that is a will comply, correct?
Yes, we will comply with that.
And then that is also something that we would work with the Township Fire Company and emergency services to prepare and ensure during the land development process. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And again, that would be something that is premature at this stage because this is a conditional use plan and the details required of other ordinances are not yet fleshed out. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
But again, it's not something that's attempted to be skirted or hidden behind. It's something that will be done at the appropriate time.
Correct.
So we're asked to provide some additional detail related to the size of the solar panels and arrays. I think you talked about this briefly, but can you summarize what's shown on these, let's say, decreased scale plan to show that how the landscaping's been incorporated and whatnot? I don't know if we've shown the landscape composition plan, which is the buffer concept plan, which is a tab 2 of applicant's exhibit A1. Can you walk us through what we're looking at?
Yeah, so this is just it's a more detailed buffering vegetative plan for what we will be proposing along Long Mountain Road. So again, this is the same composition of trees. It's a little more unorderly to kind of be a little more aligned with kind of a natural landscape. But again, we're looking at, at a minimum, a 10-foot on center of trees and a 20-foot wide buffer as well. We provided some renderings for what the site may look like after vegetative screening is installed. So this is along Long Mountain Road. As you can see, kind of out in the kind of middle of the horizon here is where the proposed vegetative screening would take place as you're driving down Long Mountain Road.
And these are imposed on actual photos of the property, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And it looks like sometime in the fall?
Yes, some nice foliage.
And is that, if we're looking out over the buffer, called the deciduous trees to the rear, is that what you referred to earlier as the significant woods that surround the rear of the property, which would serve as the buffer to the rear?
Yes, that is correct.
And approximately, I'm sorry if I'm asking you to repeat yourself, approximately what height are those trees shown?
These trees, they should be shown at, this is probably around 10 to 12 feet. So not at their mature height, but, you know, within 3 to 5 years of what their height will be after planting.
Can we go to the next page, to on Fresh Farm Road? What are we looking at there?
So we're also looking at another vegetative screening. So this is, if I may just revert back, we're looking at the vegetative screening along Kresgeville Farm Road in this location.
So that's a portion of the project that's within Polk Township, but part of the arrays that are proposed in Chestnut Hill Township.
That is correct.
Can we look at view number 3? Can you summarize what is shown there?
So this view may be further into Chestnut Hill Township, but this is just further down Kresge Farm Road, just providing another angle of visuals for how the vegetative screening will appear while driving down Kresge Farm Road.
And so that, to your professional opinion, meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance, is that correct?
That is correct.
So then the next section of the zoning ordinance talks about a copy of a current valid authorization from a utility company acknowledging and approving the connection. I think we heard earlier in Darren's testimony, is it your understanding that that is will comply at the appropriate time?
Yes, we will comply.
And in other words, if there's no interconnection, there's no solar facility, is that correct?
That is correct.
And we cannot provide that without the conditional use approval, is that correct?
That is correct.
And then the next section, the zoning ordinance talks about a proposed grading plan to be provided. In addition, E&S control plans approved by the Monroe County Conservation District, and the NPDS stormwater permit will be required. So these items are part of the land development process, correct?
That is correct.
And the grading plan and E&S plan will be provided with the land development plan, is that correct?
That is correct.
We cannot make application for NPDS at this point, is that correct?
That is correct.
But based on your professional experience, you've used your principles of engineering design in laying out areas for stormwater that will be the subject of the E&S control plan and also the NPDS stormwater permit, is that correct?
That is correct.
And though not exactly based on your professional experience, these areas are sufficient as shown on the plan, subject to the appropriate outside agency reviews, correct?
That is correct.
And thanks. So that, in other words, that's a will comply, correct?
That is correct.
And we've touched on this a bit, but additional landscape comments are discussed in the next section of the zoning ordinance that talks about trees being preserved to the extent possible along with existing buffers. You mentioned that existing woods will be used as the existing buffer to the rear of the project away from the roads. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And then part of the decommissioning requires that a reforestation component. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And then I believe that the question was raised for the board that upon decommissioning, or a survey would be conducted at a later point to document the number of trees on site and of what character. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that is what the reforestation plan will be based on during the land development process. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in all other respects, as to the types and caliber and specifications for the trees, that's a will comply. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But we can't show compliance yet because that would be based upon the final land development plan if we get that far. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So in other words, that's a will comply with things we can now, but agree to comply throughout the process as required by that section of the ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
There's also a requirement that identification and warning signs as required, including manufacturers or installers identification and appropriate warning signage not greater than 3 each, and for the minimum square footage allowed by applicable code. Do you understand that is a will comply as well?
That is a will comply, yes.
And those will be provided during the land development process and will be reviewed as part of the land development review. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And again, their location and specifics are premature at this point because the final layout is not yet determined or will be based on this conditional use permit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So in other words, that's a will comply. And you do have some details, I believe, on sheet C04. Would you mind showing what we're able to show this evening?
So on sheet C04, if we take a look at detail number 2, we have a gate signage detail, which will provide the identification of the site. Of course, we will update this phone number once we have one that is live. That will be live. And then we also have warning signs. This one specifically to high voltage around the site.
And if there are other, say, required by a solar manufacturer or some such thing, or if another code requires additional signage, we would comply with the posting and installation of such signs. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And we're required to show proposed underground utility lines and existing overhead utility lines. I believe those were on the earlier plan, but we've just shown a smaller scale detail to be more legible. Can you summarize the relevant portions showing underground utility lines on Z1, 2, and 3?
So we're looking at Z01 right now. I'll just zoom into the legend real quick in the top right corner. So where this line that says UGE, that is the proposed underground electric line that we're currently proposing around the property. The proposed underground electric line is really is connecting all of the power from the inverter pads and the inverters that are on site that collect the power from the solar panels and convert their energy from DC to AC power. So where you see underground electric lines, you will be seeing those pads as well. These lines all find their way, I'll make my way through. They all find their way, they kind of follow Long Mountain Road until they will cross over Long Mountain Road, where the underground electric line will route to the point of interconnection at the substation in Chestnut Hill Township.
So in other words, this is demonstrating requirement with the requirements of the zoning ordinance as to underground utilities. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then, if need be, road opening or occupancy permit would be obtained from Polk Township. Is that also correct?
That is correct.
We can't do that yet until we know that this is approved and we will start construction. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In other words, that's what we'll comply.
Yes.
We're also required, under the zoning ordinance, to submit land development plans. Again, that's in the future, but that's a will comply.
That is a will comply, yes.
And we're not looking for any zoning variances. Might there be what I'll call a technical waiver from a minor design standard or some such thing, but we don't yet know that until full land development plan is designed and completion. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In addition, for tonight's hearing, we require to have a professional engineer's cost estimate of the cost of decommissioning. I believe that has been provided this evening as well at tab 3 of Exhibit A1. Are you able to summarize? And again, this is an estimate which will increase as we know further details, which will be based on a conditional use approval and full land development plans. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Oh, sorry.
So what's the decommissioning cost based upon?
So the decommissioning cost, it's really based upon having the site go back to its natural, the natural pre-development conditions. So what we would be responsible for is any type of erosion sediment control practices that would need to be put down for earthwork practices. If grading was to be taken back to its pre-development status. The other part of the cost is removing the solar equipment itself. So the table provides that amount and that the amount it would take to remove all of the equipment that is currently that would be on site.
So this is the estimate that's required to be submitted as part of the conditional use application, and this will have to be reviewed further during the land development process to be finalized, and then every 5th year thereafter, this has to be resubmitted and updated, which is meant to capture cost increases and just whether to determine it's accurate as of that 5th year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So we've complied with this requirement tonight and will comply with the other requirements along the way as required in the future. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And there are additional requirements as to posting of a bond and ensuring that the landowner remains responsible and that the security is sufficient and allowing the township rights to act if we don't cooperate or comply with those requirements. But those are all will comply with the requirements of the ordinance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Additionally, outside of the, we have some general comments, but necessary to discuss pursuant to the review letter from section 502 regarding Bear Road and Long Mountain Road. We have to show the ultimate right-of-way. I believe you testified that that is now shown on these plans in conformance with section 502A. So is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I do want to note, it looks like the ultimate right-of-way did not make these plans, but the setback has been adjusted to be 130 feet away from the edge of, or away from the center line of the road, rather than 100 feet as previously submitted.
Excellent. And then section 505 of the zoning ordinance, they're not specific to the conditional use criteria. It requires the layout, design, and surfacing of the service roads and parking areas must be determined. Can you talk about the access details shown on sheet Z05?
Yep, so the access detail, the access roads for this site will be primarily composed of just all-weather access road finish, typically a PennDOT type 2A stone. Typically will provide about 6 inches of stone for the access drives with geotextile generally between the soil and the stone. For this access road, we're looking at a 12-foot wide access road with shoulders on each side, compacted with native material.
And some additional requirements outside the specifics for the conditional use application pertaining to conditional use performance standards for uses in all districts. Section 702 talks about landscape buffers as set forth. I believe you've talked about that, but it's your opinion that that requirement has been complied with by the submission of sheets Z1, 2, 3, 5, and L00. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And then 702D requires a buffer and landscape plan to demonstrate compliance. And again, same thing, same answer, I believe. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So we'll comply, but also will be provided and reviewed during the land development phase of the project as well. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then 702F talks about activity involving potential fire hazards. And I believe can you talk about whether or not there's any storage of raw or hazardous materials or equipment?
This project right now, it's not proposing the storage of any raw materials or equipment of that matter.
So in other words, it will comply with that section of the zoning ordinance?
That is correct.
And then, as far as emission of electrical disturbance or electromagnetic radiation, no adverse effect or disturbance on the operations of persons or equipment, and will be within federal limits. So your professional belief that this will comply with all FCC requirements?
We will comply, yes.
And then, at a later date, also in section 702, stormwater management plan is required to be prepared and submitted for review during the subdivision land development process. Is that a will comply?
That is a will comply, yes.
And an environmental impact analysis is being prepared, addressing all of the applicable requirements of sections 704, D, E, and F of the township zoning ordinance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you do not anticipate any negative or any findings or anything that would require relief from the zoning ordinance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Meaning that is a will comply, and compliance will be demonstrated. Is that correct?
That is correct.
We're required to show steep slope areas on the plan pursuant to section 705A of the zoning ordinance. I believe you've provided some additional labeling on sheets Z1, 2, and 3. Can you show those on the screen?
So if we go back to, on that sheet Z01, so if we go back to the legend in the top right corner, we have legend for steep slopes over 25%, which is this salmon colored hatch. So this kind of just symbolizes where the contours on the site are steeper than 25% in slope. So on C01, you can see that there is a lot of that salmon hatch where it is outside of the project boundary or the developable project boundary. If we go to C02, we do have trace amounts of that hatch in the southwestern portion of the site. And then on C03, we have just a little bit of that on the southern portion of the site as well.
So, and that is a will comply as to showing of the steep slopes, and also there's additional requirements on disturbances to steep slopes. Do we anticipate any issues or concerns with disturbance of steep slopes?
Not at this time.
And then, according to the Monroe County Conservation District, wetlands delineation is considered to be valid for a period not exceeding 2 years. Can you explain that requirement and summarize what we've done to date and will do to continue to comply with this requirement?
So this requirement is pretty much saying that when we went out and field delineated the natural resources on this site, that delineation is provided to be applicable for 2 years. So anywhere on these plans, and I'm looking at Z03 right now, where we have field delineated natural wetlands and watercourses. So here we have this green hatched area, which symbolizes wetlands found on site. And then we also have, I apologize, my mouse is not working. And I'll just zoom into this area where we have a blue line that provides where streams were located on site. This requirement is saying that these delineations will be sound for the next 2 years. We provided this wetland delineation in October of 2022. So we are still within that 2-year window per the Monroe County Conservation District regulations.
So that's a will, we comply currently, and in an ongoing manner will continue to comply.
That is correct.
Sections 1209 of the ordinance has some specific criteria. I'll ask you the specific criteria that pertain to your area of expertise, and we'll bring back additional witnesses to testify to some others. Let's talk about the requirements for driveways and service roads pursuant to section 1209 D5B. Can you highlight what's been shown and what's proposed for the driveways to the site?
So if you go to sheet Z02, along Long Mountain Road, there is an existing, what appears to be a farm lane at this time that enters the Baumgartner site. So we will utilize this entrance and upgrade it and improve it to be applicable for construction, emergency services, and routine maintenance vehicles.
So it's use of an existing access point, correct?
That is correct.
And that's to minimize impact and not change the character of the use of the area roads, is that correct?
That is correct.
And after construction, there's hardly anyone accessing the site, is that correct?
That is correct.
Somewhat repetitive, we testified this to before, but section 1209 D5D requires that stormwater management facilities be provided. Can you highlight anything I've missed or that you would like to add as to the stormwater management facilities and what will be done during the land development process?
During the land development process, while we have locations of stormwater facilities at this time, during the land development process, we'll go through more calculations and analysis to provide more accurate basins or stormwater facilities that will be necessary for the stormwater control of this property. That being stormwater peak rate mitigation, volume control, and water quality control on the site.
And there are many general criteria, but I'm going to run through these as quickly as possible. I think you've hit on many of them from section 1209 D5. But location, arrangement, size, design, general site capacity of buildings, lighting, and signage. Is there any lighting proposed with this application?
There's no lighting proposed.
And in the Polk Township portion, are there any buildings proposed?
There are no buildings proposed.
So the new facilities will be limited to solar panels, access roads, stormwater management facilities, fencing, and buffers.
That is correct.
And then we're required to make arrangements for the adequacy of vehicular traffic and circulation, including intersections, road widths, pavement surfaces, dividers, and traffic controls. Is any of that applicable to a commercial solar facility?
That is not applicable.
But we will make provisions for emergency services and show that the fire trucks of the Township Fire Company can circulate and maneuver through the site if need be. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then, we talked about this earlier, but we've made provisions for location arrangement, appearance and sufficiency of off-street parking and loading. There will be no loading.
There will be no loading on this project.
And if need be, parking areas can be delineated as required for maintenance workers or during the construction phase. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And is there any applicable design requirements for pedestrian traffic, circulation, walkways? There's no pedestrian access. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So that does not apply. You've addressed the adequacy of stormwater management drainage facilities, and I don't believe I've asked you, will these be designed to accommodate at least the 10-year storm?
Yes, they will.
And then, is there any proposed need for water or sewage disposal facilities?
Not on this project, there will not be.
And then we've discussed, you've testified to the adequacy type of arrangement of trees, shrubs, and landscaping constituting a visual and noise buffer between this and the adjoining lands. And part of that is retaining existing vegetation to the extent possible, using the woods to the rear away from the road. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So in other words, you believe you comply with that requirement of zoning ordinance?
That is correct.
And then you testified then that fire lanes and emergency zones and provision of any necessary emergency equipment would be provided for during the land development process. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And is there anything we need to discuss that you'd like to highlight to show that we comply with special attention to the adequacy and impact of structures, roadways, landscaping, and/or whether there's any areas susceptible to ponding, flooding, or other erosion?
We can definitely touch upon the last one. In this project, the slopes are definitely, there doesn't seem to be a lot of flat portions on this project, so we do not anticipate any types of ponding. This will be a lot of sheet flow from runoff going to our proposed permanent basins. So we do not see that being an anticipated concern.
And there's some overlap with conditional use and land development requirements. One of those called out is landscaping at South Section 345-16, requiring that landscaping is required in accordance with that section of the SALDO, mapping of existing vegetation in certain trees, and showing preservation of existing vegetation or supplementation. Is there anything you feel we need to supplement from your earlier testimony to demonstrate compliance to the applicable portion of that section as be complying with that during the subdivision and land development portion of this approval? Is that correct?
That is correct.
So at this point, I have some additional testimony that I would like to bring forward, but it will be depending upon what our additional witnesses say, in particular our glare engineer who prepared our glare study. I'd like to stop at this point and continue with Mr. Palehan. Sorry, I'm butchering your name. Tom. I'd like to continue with Tom on the 29th of August and bring additional witnesses at that time. Is that agreeable to the board?
That's agreeable to the board.
If we can hold for some questions now on what's been testified this evening.
The first thing we're going to do is ask Donna, stenographer, if she needs a break. She knows. Can you go to that?
Sure thing.
Why don't we, since the folks are here, allow one question. If we don't finish all the questions by 9, you can come back and continue the questions at the next session. So at this point, I would again open it up to anybody that is recognized as a participant. If you want to ask questions, now's the time to do that. Yes, sir.
Hi, Stuart Hochberg. You talked about running electrical lines from the solar panels on Long Mountain Road to the substation. Where are you going to lay those?
I'm sorry, where?
Yeah,
Where are you going to lay the line?
Can you come sit up here because the air conditioning is...
I said, you talked about running electrical lines from the solar panels themselves on Long Mountain Road to the substation in Chestnut Hill. Where are you planning to lay those lines?
We will be laying the lines within our, beyond the 130-foot setback on Long Mountain Road, so it'll all be enclosed within the proposed fence. The only area where it will be closer to Long Mountain Road is where it will cross to reach the substation.
All right, but where is it going to cross to reach the substation?
So this is preliminary. This is just a conceptual design at this point, and will be designed further through land development. But at this time, we're showing the underground electric line crossing at Long Mountain Road in this area, a little bit south of Kresgeville Farm Road, where we will link up to the solar panels in this area, cross over the transmission line, and end up at the point of interconnection on the substation.
So you're going from Long Mountain to Crescent to do this, you're not going to do the properties?
That is correct.
Anyone else? Questions? participant. I'm not a participant. And you can't ask questions at this time. Oh, I thought you were opening up to everybody. No, we will. Next time, I promise. Gotcha. Misunderstood. Yes, sir.
Doug, explain. Did your firm do the wetland study? Was it your company or some other company did it?
We did the wetland delineation study.
You did it? And did you do the Indian, was your company also one that did the Indian artifacts search?
That was a sub-consultant hired with us who did the phase 1A studies.
Okay, and did your firm do any type of environmental studies on the property at all?
We did do a phase 1 environmental site analysis. That was also through a sub-consultant.
Okay. And your firm will be doing the electrical engineering, I'm assuming?
I do believe we will be doing that. It has not been finalized at this time, but further into land development.
And you show one substation right across Polk Township's line, right, very close to the existing overhead power lines, correct?
That is correct.
And where's the second substation going to be?
I do believe there will only be one substation.
Okay, I thought he said two.
I'm sorry, you do believe?
There will only be one substation for this project.
And that's currently adjacent to the overhead existing high tension lines that run through there now?
That is correct.
Okay.
Mike McMurtry. First, in regards to the buffering, has there been any plans to have buffering along access roads that adjoin properties? So far, you've only talked about screening the solar farm. And I apologize because you probably don't see it on this map, but on the Chestnut Hill side, there's an access road or access point that will be directly alongside my property that I anticipate will have high use during construction and occasional use during maintenance. I don't know if there are any other points in the plan that I obviously have cuts straight on those, but is there any plan to buffer access roads where necessary, where they join properties?
Yeah, I will note that the buffering shown here is strictly for Polk Township. And once we begin the process in Chestnut Hill Township, I would anticipate there will be vegetative screening in those areas that currently are not shown.
Okay. You've revised this plan for the lot coverage. Again, obviously, it's just Polk Township. But did you also check the lot coverage on the Chestnut Hill Township, or will that information be provided at a later time?
That will be provided at a later time. We've only provided the lot coverage at Polk Township for this time.
There was as part of, I think it was the environmental study, maybe it was another part of the application, there was discussion on endangered wildlife effects. Was there any consideration of just, I'll call it general wildlife effects of the project on the area? And this is a significant wooded area with significant wildlife present. Is there any considerations or any discussions where that's concerned for the project?
You'll have to forgive me, I'm not the wetland specialist. I do know that we do study endangered species or species that are close to endangered, whether that's wildlife, fish, or plants. I do not know certainly if we conduct wildlife in general, but that is something that we can provide further information for at the next hearing.
On the decommissioning plan estimate, I didn't note any line items for replacement of trees in that estimate. There's some estimate proceeding that certainly wouldn't cover the size of trees that need to be replaced in the case of doing that. And I understand the study needs to be performed first, but at least we understand it's an estimate, but I would expect the replacement of sizable trees to be a significant cost.
It will be a line item in the decommissioning. I know this is definitely an estimate, but it will be more specific through land development when we have a better idea of the tree replacement that will take place.
My next couple of questions just relate to the stormwater issues and runoff and whatnot. As was noted during the fire discussion, our water is by wells. So the underground aquifer is something that will be affected by drainage and changes in drainage. And I would expect, well, let me ask the first question. The detail of the solar panel had indicated that they were going to be mounted on steel piles. Are there going to be concrete, stone, other items in the base? How big is that base going to be? How would that affect the actual ground penetration, as it were, of the water for the construction of those panels?
So is this in reference to the additional concrete that would be at the surface?
Correct.
Usually the concrete that is embedded with the piles is very insignificant overall to the site. It's usually less than 5% of what the overall site is. It's a very insignificant amount of impervious area that's added to the site, but it is something that we incorporate just to make sure that any type of improvements that we're making will be mitigated with our stormwater approach.
You'd mentioned in talking about the stormwater that the general effect of the areas where the panels are would be that of a meadow. Sorry, I don't know the science behind it, but how different is that from the current use in the forest land than it is as far as how much water is going to be absorbed into the groundwater and the effect on the wells in the area?
So I would say in regards to the agricultural land, there generally is an improvement just because the agricultural land is grazed and it's very close to the soil itself. So when we incorporate the meadow vegetation, it tends to be a much more receptive land cover to groundwater recharge. Now that is to say, on the wooded side, the wooded area does provide a bit of a better groundwater recharge than a meadow land would provide. That is one reason why we provide the amount of stormwater facilities to ensure that any of that runoff that may not be captured within the wooded area will now be captured within the basins and still infiltrate into the ground and not leave the site, causing additional runoff to neighboring properties.
Are there any, do you have any knowledge of, or do you know if there are any studies that talk about changes in the composition of what's going into the soil? I'm sure with the panels, there's some sort of oxidation that's occurring over time, which will get washed off by rainwater as it comes. Does that have any effect, or are we aware of any effect that has on groundwater and its purity or its composition or whatnot?
Just out of my expertise as a civil engineer, I can't answer to that right now, but it's something we can try to look into and have an answer for the next hearing.
That's all I have questions on that.
Anybody else? Yes, sir. Yeah, Mark Martini. You talk about your solar panels. I mean, they sit like this. Now you have a flat surface, and the rain hits that, and you're saying you're only using a minute amount of concrete. I'm guessing at the base to hold stuff from not falling over. So now you take a panel like this, and you put rainwater on it. It's not going down into the ground to disperse. Now you're taking it, and you're creating more at one certain area, all in a row coming down through. Your access roads that you're laying out with that geofabric and your two-way modified that you have is no way going to hold up if you have rain like that, especially not behind my house because it's already a water runoff down and over. So you're going to try to put a road in someplace that's going to sink. You know, you're creating more water into the ground. It's already wet. We already have water problems back around our place. And now you're going to create more water runoff because it's not open area for the rain to come down through and disperse. You're making solid, flat panels for it to catch it and basically make it like a gutter.
I do understand what you're saying. I do want to mention that, one, there will be gaps between the panels. So when there is runoff, it won't be hitting the concrete surface.
No, I know that's going to be hitting the dirt. That's what I'm saying. Your gaps that are going to be in between your panels are basically going to be gutters now. So that water's going to hit that and go down through like a gutter.
That is true. We make sure that there are slopes that would require something such as a drip tray or something of that matter, where we would have to put down some sort of gravel surface to help mitigate any type of additional accelerated runoff if the slopes were too steep. And this is also coming from Pennsylvania. There's an FAQ guideline for solar panel installation. So if we do have slopes that are too steep, that go above a certain percentage threshold, we would have to provide additional stormwater measures below the panels for reasons just like that. So we don't promote additional accelerated erosion or scour with our proposed improvements such as the access roads that we have on these plans. So I will say that at this time, we're just proposing, due to the slopes that we found, we're having water runoff, drip off of the solar panel arrays. But we're at a slope where we do not anticipate that there will be an accelerated erosion of that matter. I also want to note that if these panels are tracking, that they will be also moving with the sun, so they won't always be at a dedicated position. So rainwater won't always be hitting that one spot, depending on the time of day. So it also may move maybe to the opposite side. So with that being said, there won't be a point where there's going to be just a constant point of contact below the panel.
It rotates, it pivots. I'm just the amount of water that it collects instead of just naturally dispersing. Now you're just basically, dropping water. It doesn't matter if it's this way, or this way. You're still dropping water like this into an area that's already wet.
And then I do want to mention that we will have permanent stormwater facilities at the edges of our panel areas. And the point of those stormwater facilities are to make sure that however the current stormwater is being run off to neighboring areas, that we do not exceed that in rate or volume or water quality, so that we're not becoming more detrimental to areas around us, that we're going to help improve it through the use of these stormwater structures.
Okay, and another question I have, you were saying about, what was it, Pennsylvania's regulations as far as, installing and whatnot. You said about you'll abide by all, like, Pennsylvania's EMF regulations and whatnot. What are them?
There's, are you referring to the Chapter 102 NPDES guidelines for?
Yeah, I'm just asking, does Pennsylvania even, do they have a guidelines, or do they have a regulations that you must follow?
They do have solar FAQ guidelines that we do follow, and that the DEP uses when they review our plans during the NPDES review. So we follow those guidelines as well as the Chapter 102 guidelines out of the PA code.
That's all I got.
Anybody else?
Oh, yeah, actually, I do have one more. The pictures you took alongside of Long Mountain and Kresge Farm Road, the road sits here. Y'all are taking the picture from the property, which is down here. You're not taking it from the height of the road, if you look. See where you, well, no, you can back up where you're at there, picture the way it's taken.
Yeah, I just wanted to head down to the key map really quickly, just to see where the viewpoint is for the one on Long Mountain Road.
That's Long Mountain right there.
So here's Long Mountain, so our picture is kind of viewing at this angle.
Right, you stepped
there.
off the road to the left. You're down off the road taking a picture. If you're taking a picture of something, if you're laying on the ground and something's up, the road's up here, your step's down here taking a picture that way. So it makes it look like it's a better view than what it's actually gonna be. You got 4 foot here, the road drops off that much on Long Mountain. Same thing over there at Kresge Farm Road. Pip and Susie's house is up on a hill like this. You just took the picture on Kresge Farm Road, stepping down off. You're not at road height. It looks better than what it's actually gonna be. That was just a statement, any question, but.
Understood.
I had one general question, Doug Swank. Will these gentlemen be available for questions on the 29th again?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that it? Members of the board, do you have any questions before we break up here?
I just have a quick question. At the planning commission meeting, I asked, how many wooded acres will be removed? Is there any guesstimate?
Right now, we're looking at roughly 50.
What's the quality of the trees that would be removed? Are they hardwoods, or are they just pines, or any type of quality that you know of?
At this point, I'm not too sure, but we would definitely have a better idea after a tree survey is conducted.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. The first one regarding the service roads. They appear to be a series of stubs, dead-end roads, and I wonder how you picture them being used safely by fire trucks.
At this time, with the drawings as they are stubs, but we would like to work with the fire department to make sure that at a turnaround, we provide adequate radius for any type of fire truck or emergency vehicle turnarounds.
I think we're maybe more thinking about loop roads and turnarounds. The other question is similar to this gentleman's question. Picture is up there. It was unclear to me that the deciduous vegetation in the background is on the west or it's on the north, part of which is going to be removed for solar panels.
You're referring to the vegetation in the rear?
In the background, yeah.
So there definitely will be a portion of this being removed, but not all of it. So there is still a very generous amount of wooded area beyond what we're removing around the property. So there will still be vegetation back there, although it may not be exactly how it looks in this picture.
In the construction phase, what order would you put the fencing, the screening, and the installation of the panels? What order would you think that would follow?
Usually, not being the contractor, I can't be 100% correct, but typically the earthwork would occur first, and then at that point they would bring in posts for the solar arrays, and at that point generally fencing and the importing of the solar panels would happen concurrently, just so that there's a security around the site when there are more valuable materials within there. And then the vegetative screening typically comes at post-construction once all of the improvements around the solar panels are complete.
I have one question. The decommissioning report, which is tab number 3 of your exhibit, was that prepared by your firm?
That was prepared by us, yes.
I would ask that the next time you have substitute exhibits where they're actually signed by somebody, these aren't signed by any, signed by, sealed by the engineer, to do that.
Yep, not a problem.
Okay, and this was noted by one of the participants. These estimates do not, and I'm not suggesting they have to, they don't deal with replacement trees. Would it be your intention to deal with that in the land development plan? This matter in the development agreement?
That is correct.
Yeah, I have nothing further.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, one more, and then we're gonna adjourn.
The plan for landscape maintenance of the panels you'd indicated in the sheet, is there going to be somebody on site that's going to be responsible for those, or how is the care of those animals going to be managed? It's just not eating the grass, it's the water, it's everything else that goes into their care.
In our previous experience for the other project in Virginia and West Virginia, we do have someone, not 24/7, but regularly go inside to the site itself and then go to manage the ship for the grazing.
Okay, but they won't be on site?
Not 24/7.
Members of the board, at this point, it is now 8:53. You've been at it for almost 3 hours. I would suggest we adjourn and reconvene this hearing on August 29, 2023 at 6 p.m. I would, before we adjourn, I would mark as an additional township exhibit number 6, which is the statements of all the participants. That would be township exhibit number 6. And I would note for members of the audience, this hearing will not be advertised again, it will not be posted, so I noted that some of the people left. If you want to get word out to those people and anybody else that the hearing will take place on August 29th at 6 o'clock at the same location, that would be appreciated. So, Board, somebody should make a motion to adjourn at this point and to, we're not closing the hearing. The hearing is still open. So the 45-day period to make a decision does not start to run until the hearing is closed. And we're under no obligation to do anything except at the end of the next hearing. Okay, Kathy?